A lot can happen in just 4 years in the NFL. Teams can build themselves up to be a contender or tear themselves down and rebuild, or some can luck into a Super Bowl. Just 4 years ago in 2016, the Denver Broncos, Carolina Panthers, and Arizona Cardinals were all playing in their conference championship game. The Cardinals in particular were coming off of an impressive 13-3 finish in 2015, and despite losing in the NFC Championship game, it was their third straight season finishing with double-digit wins. However, fast forward a few years to present day 2020, and the Cardinals haven't made the playoffs since and have yet to finish with a record over 500. Now they do have a bright future ahead, led by head coach Kliff Kingsbury, quarterback Kyler Murray, and newly acquired wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. But how did the Cardinals get to this point of a rebuild? In today's video, we'll be looking at what happened to the Arizona Cardinals. Now let's head into the 2016 offseason as a start. The Cardinals had some work to do this offseason as it was the second straight year that they lost to the Panthers in the playoffs. Arizona didn't have any glaring weaknesses to note, and after going 13-3, they needed to just add some more pieces to their team. They didn't add too much in free agency, but the guys they did add weren't any small names. To protect Carson Palmer, they added guard Evan Mathis from the Philadelphia Eagles, who was a good piece on a strong Eagles offensive line. But the addition of Mathis wasn't met without some subtraction on the offensive line, as the Cardinals would lose 3 of their offensive linemen from the year before. The aging pass rush and line was also a focus this offseason, and the Cardinals traded for defensive end Chandler Jones, who put together some strong seasons in New England, and signed safety Tyvon Branch as another option for the secondary. Heading into the draft, the Cardinals targeted another defensive lineman, which was Ole Miss defensive end Robert Nkemdiche. They would finish the draft by adding another piece in the secondary in Brandon Williams and another offensive lineman in Evan Baum. Despite a little bit of loss in the offseason, this Cardinals team was stacked and ready to build on their 13-3 season. They were projected by many to win the NFC West and challenge for a Super Bowl, but things got off to a slow start. In week 1, the Cardinals matched up with the Patriots, and with Tom Brady facing a 4-game suspension, Arizona were favorites to win the game. They lost by just 2 points, but bounced back the next week against Tampa in a 40-7 victory. But luck wasn't on their side the following 2 weeks as they dropped the next 2 games to put them at 1-3 on the season. And heading into their bye week just 4 weeks later, the team was 3-4-1, with a tie coming to the Seattle Seahawks. It wasn't the start the Cardinals were expecting at all, but injuries ended up destroying this team's season and ruined any chance of a second half comeback. The Cardinals finished the season at a disappointing 7-8-1 and watched the Seattle Seahawks win the NFC West. 16 players ended the season on injured reserve, including safety Tyrann Mathieu. The offense still played pretty good, and thanks to running back David Johnson, who totaled 2,000 yards on the season, they averaged 26 points per game, which was good enough for the 6th best scoring offense in the league that season. So the focus heading into the offseason would be on the defense. In free agency, they added another safety in Antoine Bethea, linebacker Jarvis Jones, linebacker Carlos Dansby, and added offensive lineman Tony Bergstrom to give Palmer more protection. However, they lost defensive end Calais Campbell to the Jaguars in free agency, and that would be a huge loss trying to replace his production. They faced even more loss as well, losing wide receiver Jaron Brown, linebacker Kevin Minter, guards Evan Mathis and Earl Watford, and safeties Tony Jefferson and DJ Swearinger. In the draft, they targeted Hassan Riddick with the first-round pick in the hopes of finding another stud linebacker, and then traded up for safety Budda Baker in the second round to cover the losses at safety, and added receiver Chad Williams to cover the loss of Jaron Brown, and even more offensive linemen. They weren't projected to do well in the 2017 season, as there was a lot of loss faced from the previous season and not enough replacements made for critics to believe in this team. And with David Johnson and an aging Larry Fitzgerald as the only 2 threats left on offense, there was some decline to be expected. The Cardinals would end up with yet again another average season, going 8-8 and not being able to win more than 2 games in a row until the last 2 weeks of the season. It was a disappointing year, and the Cardinals just couldn't find any consistency. But once again, the Cardinals dealt with a ton of injuries this year, but none was felt more than the losses of David Johnson, who didn't even play a full game in the season, and Carson Palmer, who played 7 games on the season. The Cardinals struggled with inconsistent quarterback play, bouncing between Blaine Gabbert and Drew Stanton. After this point, things just started to go more downhill. Head coach Bruce Arians decided to step down and leave Arizona, and replacing him would be then Panthers defensive coordinator Steve Wilkes. With the age of the team being felt more and more as the days went on, the Cardinals knew they needed to start to find youth at the skill positions, but they lost even more in free agency, which was headlined by Tyrann Mathieu, John Brown, and Jared Veldheer. Carson Palmer would also announce his retirement during the offseason. Now they attacked free agency with a focus on fixing the weaknesses on this team, adding tackle Andre Smith, guard Justin Pugh, 2 quarterbacks in Sam Bradford and Mike Glennon, and 3 cornerbacks to try and find a pair with Patrick Peterson. In the draft, they selected quarterback Josh Rosen with the hope that he could be the successor to Carson Palmer, wide receiver Christian Kirk to give him a young receiver to grow with, and running back Chase Edmonds in the later rounds. But this 2018 season would be a disaster and was the worst Cardinal season in a while. They went 3-13 and had the worst offense in the entire NFL. The offensive line was once again not up to par, and there was little to no contributions from the weapons they had on offense. Josh Rosen actually got to play during the season, but because he had no help surrounding him, he didn't have a great year, throwing for 11 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. It was a disappointing season, but the course of the Cardinals changed after this year, and the trajectory slowly started to change. Steve Wilkes was fired after one season, along with his coaching staff, and was replaced by Texas Tech head coach Kliff Kingsbury. For some, it seemed like Kingsbury could be the second coming of Sean McVay, and that's exactly what the Cardinals were looking for. It wasn't too long that their offense was among the best in the NFL, so they went after an offensive specialist and one of the hottest names in the coaching carousel. Some thought he might not be ready to make the jump just yet, but general manager Steve Keim and company saw differently. A few days after he was hired, there were YouTube clips going around from Kliff Kingsbury stating that if he had the number 1 pick in the draft, he would select Oklahoma's Kyler Murray. And sure enough, that clip started rumors, and those rumors were true, as with the number 1 pick in the draft, the Cardinals selected quarterback Kyler Murray from Oklahoma. They would proceed to trade Josh Rosen to Miami for a second-round pick, and with the losses they dealt with in free agency the previous season, Arizona gained 4 compensatory draft picks. They made 11 total selections in this draft, including the additions of corner Byron Murphy and receiver Andy Isabella in the second round. Arizona would proceed to add linebacker Jordan Hicks in free agency and cornerback Robert Alford to multi-year deals. The 2019 season went alright as the Cardinals went 5-10-1 during the season, and at one point were 3-3-1. They had some close losses, but quarterback Kyler Murray showed his promise this season and won Offensive Rookie of the Year. And defensive end Chandler Jones balled out this season and made the All-Pro team. And with the Cardinals acquiring DeAndre Hopkins recently from the Texans, they're continuing to add more talent by the day. This team's trajectory went up in just one season, and they appear to have a bright future ahead. But what were the main causes of this Cardinals rebuild? I think the first thing that we can begin to look at is the age of this team from that NFC Championship game. In 2015, the Cardinals had the 27th youngest overall roster in the league. And while their defense was incredibly young, ranking at 7th, the Cardinals' offense was the 31st youngest in the league, behind only the Jets in age. It was only a matter of time before the offense saw the production of their team take a hit due to the age. Carson Palmer's career began to go downhill after this season, and while Larry Fitzgerald is still a good wide receiver, he wasn't getting any younger, and with him as the only threat for the Cardinals for the last few seasons, it made sense why the offensive production took a hit. The next reason for their downfall would be the moves made by this team to replace production. Now, in recent times, the Cardinals have made some pretty good trades and free agent signings to try and fix this team, but Steve Keim's moves got this team in this mess in the first place. They lost far too much in the past few offseasons and made little to no replacements to fix it. Losing Calais Campbell was huge, and they could never find a solid replacement for him. Chandler Jones has done a great job in his Cardinals career, and his production on the field is so underrated, but imagine him with a threat similar to Calais Campbell. They also failed to find any secondary help to pair with Patrick Peterson in his prime, and losing Tyrann Mathieu made things even worse. The offensive line has still needed work for the past few seasons, and since losing John Brown in free agency, this offseason has just struggled, which we will get into in just a second. Keim also replaced Bruce Arians with Steve Wilkes, somebody who may not have been ready for the job in the first place. In his only season as the head coach, we saw arguably one of the worst offensive seasons in Cardinals history, and the roster fielded was not good at all. Wilkes implemented a new scheme that season on defense as well, moving to the 4-3, which would stunt the growth of the young edge rushers the Cardinals had invested in the past few offseasons. And if we remove the 2019 draft class, the Cardinals have gotten little to no production from the 3 classes before that. Now, Budda Baker is a great player, Chase Edmonds showed promise this last season, and Christian Kirk is flashing his potential, but other than that, there is nothing. And for a separate reason for their downfall, the offensive production in itself has contributed to the fall too. The Cardinals thrived off the deep ball in 2015, with Palmer throwing 33 completions for 1,074 yards and 10 touchdowns on throws traveling 20 or more yards in the air, according to Pro Football Focus. That helped transform their offense into a top 5 offense, and since losing wide receiver John Brown, they have yet to find a threat to stretch the field like he was able to. John Brown also dealt with injuries during the last 2 seasons of his Cardinals career, and he struggled to find consistency in his play. Taking away that dynamic and threat alone resulted in the Cardinals' downfall on the offensive side of the ball. Last but not least, we have the health of this team. I was looking through the injured reserve list every season, and there were so many key contributors on those lists that it's no wonder the Cardinals struggled. In 2016, the Cardinals lost 3 safeties, including Tyrann Mathieu, linebacker Deion Buchanan, running back Chris Johnson, and tackle Jared Veldheer. In 2017, Carson Palmer, David Johnson, edge rusher Marcus Golden, guard Mikey Upati, and 3 more safeties ended the season on injured reserve. Those losses in themselves played into those average seasons for the Cardinals and kick-started the rebuild. But it all just plays into itself. From the age of the team to the injuries faced to the bad replacements and the offensive production, they all linked together and were the reasons why the Cardinals fell. Thankfully now the future is bright in Arizona, but it's been a long 4 seasons to get to this point. The Cardinals have some good pieces on the squad now, but only time will tell just how good this new and improved Cardinals team can be this upcoming season and beyond, and if Kyler Murray, Kliff Kingsbury, and DeAndre Hopkins can guide this team back to the playoffs. This has been a video on the Arizona Cardinals. Thank you guys so much for watching. Subscribe if you're new, and as always, I will see you guys next time.